All right, everybody. Probably the most sought after videos for this last part of class is going to be this. Well, maybe not. Maybe the reproductive system will also get you female reproductive hormones. But a lot of people are probably questioning urinary system physiology, meaning, well, we went too far, meaning urine production. How is urine produced? Okay, so I'm going to do this in a couple of chunked out videos where I'm going to try to go through the whole entire process for you and then explain a couple of the more intricate aspects of it. So urine production is going to really include three things. Sometimes it includes two things, and then the third thing is a little bit different, but really what you want to think about is it's going to include three processes, okay? So we need three processes for urine production, really three processes for just regular everyday urine production, meaning you're nice and hydrated, you're nice and healthy, and you're normal, essentially. The first one is called glomerular filtration. So glomerular filtration is just what it says. It's what happens at the glomerulus, okay? And I might increase this picture a little bit so I can show you a little bit larger scale. But remember what's happening here, right? Blood is coming off of the cortical radiate artery, entering the afferent arteriole and coming through the glomerulus. Then blood will exit out of the efferent arteriole, okay? So you have to understand how blood's flowing in, so you understand how blood's being filtered. So you want to think about the glomerulus is a fenestrated capillary. So maybe we just draw that portion out where we have like a fenestrated capillary. So that's going to be one side of my capillary, basically. Just think about my capillary is going to have holes in it, okay? And then on the other side of the capillary, you have these little feet for the podocytes, like that. And that creates our filtration membrane, all right? So basically, you have to think about as blood flows into the capillary, it's going to contain things like red blood cells. That's my white blood cell. It's going to have, you know, like a little bit kind of smaller cells. Those are my platelets. It has things like, you know, proteins, glucose, amino acids, waste products, water, all of those things. So there's a big products and it has small products or big portions. Let me rephrase that. It has things like formed elements that we've seen, so parts of the cellular components of blood, and then it has plasma. And plasma is going to be everything that's basically dissolved in the water-based portion of blood. See how blood came back again? Why was important? So since this is our filtration membrane right here, we want to understand what's essentially happening. So as blood flows in from the afferent arteriole, it's going to hit the glomerulus right here, right? It's going to hit our glomerulus right there, okay? So a good large volume of blood hits the kidney every time blood gets pumped from the left ventricle. So it's going to be under high pressure. So we're going to have a high pressure situation here. So you can say high blood pressure slash MAP. Remember mean arterial pressure. Mean arterial pressure should be quite high. So as these substances and water push against the filtration membrane, essentially they're going to want to break through the filtration membrane because on the other side of the membrane, so we have a high blood pressure on this side slash high mean arterial pressure on that side. On the other side, we're actually going to have a lower pressure. Basically, this is hydrostatic pressure, but I'm just going to call it, yeah, I'm going to call it hydrostatic pressure, okay? And we actually also have a lower osmotic pressure as well. If you don't remember from capillary stuff, this is why capillary stuff was important. Because essentially, high blood pressure, high MAP was a high hydrostatic pressure, right? High hydrostatic pressure. We kind of equated all of them together. Hydrostatic pressure is the force that water is going to exert on the filtration membrane. Because that pressure is so high, it's going to start to force anything that's small enough to go through the fenestrations and then also to go through the slits where the podocytes are. It's going to push those substances through the filtration membrane and into the glomerular capsule space. And that's what that part's going to be. Okay, that's what this area is. Remember, we have our parietal layer on the outside, and then our visceral layer is the podocyte layer. So that's our glomerular capsule space. Okay. So things that are going to move out of blood is something that you want to understand. Anything small enough. So it's like water gets moved, amino acids are kind of small. We have things like glucose, which is basically just small parts of sugar gets moved. You have waste products like creatinine, urea, uric acid, all get pushed out. Okay. So about 20% of blood volume will end up as the filtrate, and then 80% is going to leave. Okay. So like think about like 20%. So you don't want to lose 20% of your blood volume. Think about that. That's 20% of your water volume is going to be lost at kidneys. That's a really, really, really bad idea. Okay. And then what we're going to see is like, so the 80% that leaves, some of that's still going to contain waste. It's still going to contain glucose. It's going to contain water. It's going to contain like plasma proteins, platelets, red blood cells, and leukocytes. This is why all of those things should be found, should be, not found, but should be negative when you do a urine test. So urine analysis test, you should never have blood or leukocytes or proteins, maybe trace amount of proteins, but you should never have those larger substances in urine, because if you do, that means they push through the filtration membrane, which is a bad thing to happen. Okay. So glomerular filtration is going to create the filtrate. Basically, that's our filtrate. But I don't want to lose everything to my filtrate. So now what I have to do is pick stuff back up again, okay? So the efferent arteriole, we're going to remember, becomes the peritubular capillary. And I'm just going to draw my peritubular capillary as it goes back around, okay? And this is a juxtamedullary nephron, so I'm going to see that I have a vasa recta. Right, the vasa recta dips into the renal medulla area, into the renal pyramid itself. So since I don't want to lose 20% of substances, now I have to do my second part of urine production, and that's called tubular reabsorption. But what I found is that is actually a really loaded word, tubular. So what I tell students is you kind of put parentheses here and put peritubular. Because remember, this is the peritubular capillary. Whoops. And because of that, we want to understand peritubular reabsorption, or tubular reabsorption means you pull stuff back into the peritubular capillary, okay? This primarily happens at the proximal convoluted tubule. So roughly 60 to 70% of the filtrate is actually going to get reabsorbed here at the proximal convoluted tubule. So you want to think about the stuff that you reabsorb. You want to reabsorb things like sodium. Oh, I forgot here. Ions like sodium chloride, calcium, all that sort of stuff. So we're going to absorb sodium, and we do. Actually, water will follow that, okay? We also reabsorb glucose. So all the glucose that you lose in the filtrate, all of it, 100% of it should be reabsorbed at the proximal convoluted tubule. Okay, if you're not reabsorbing glucose at the proximal convoluted tubule, that means you have too much glucose in your bloodstream already. So essentially your body is going to try to get rid of it. And because glucose will remain in the proximal convoluted tubule because your blood glucose levels are too high, water will follow that glucose, okay? So that means that you're going to have a lot of water and sugar in the filtrate, and that ends up in your urine. Usually that only happens for people who have diabetes mellitus. This is why if you do a urine test on your patient and they have really high glucose in urine, you would basically do more testing to see if they did in fact have diabetes mellitus, okay? So the filtrate, which is now going to be less than 20% because you reabsorbed most of it. So it's probably more like 60% of whatever 20% is. This is why I don't care if you guys know those percentages, but basically you're going to have a little bit of filtrate left, like not the whole portion of filtrate. It's going to go down the descending limb of the nephron loop, and it's going to come up the ascending limb of the nephron loop. Okay, so every nephron loop in the descending limb, you're going to have reabsorption of water all the way down. And that's going to change your filtrate so that essentially once you lose water, it's going to become super salty. So the filtrate at the bottom of the nephron loop is going to have a really high concentration of salt. And then as the filtrate goes back up, the ascending limb, what happens is sodium and some chloride, things like, you know, get reabsorbed, basically. Okay, on that side. And that means at the top of the ascending limb, you actually are going to have a lower concentration of sodium. The filtrate's then going to enter the distal convoluted tubule, okay, where you can continue to do some paratubular reabsorption. So here you can reabsorb things like sodium and water will follow, or you can reabsorb calcium, but you need hormones in order to do this. The hormone for sodium, if you remember, is aldosterone. Sorry about my really small writing right there. It looks kind of bad. And then the reabsorption of calcium is going to be by parathyroid hormone, okay? You can also continue to do some reabsorption here at the collecting duct. If you need to reabsorb sodium, you need aldosterone. And essentially water will follow that. If you just want to reabsorb water, you need antidiuretic hormone in order to do that. So that's our tubular reabsorption. The third part of creating urine is actually tubular secretion. So again, you put the peri in front of it so that you understand it's the paratubular capillary that's going to secrete stuff. And I forgot to make different colors. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, in this case, I'm going to use a different color. I think I'll just use, yeah, orange here. So you understand what I'm moving is stuff from the capillary into the filtrate, okay? So you can do, so we'll just do number 3 isn't orange here. Ooh, I hope orange is not too bad for you guys. You can move some waste. Ooh, that is actually bad. Let's do green. Waste. Okay. Actually, we can move some waste. So things like hydrogens, we can move urea, uric acid. You can move drugs that maybe you ingested that didn't get fully filtered during our filtration system from the paratubular capillary into the proximal convoluted tubule. And you can also do that in the distal convoluted tubule as well. Okay, distal convoluted tubule, and you might also do some paratubular secretion in the collecting duct. That's the thing you want to think about when you think about peritubular secretion, why are you doing that? You're doing that if certain solutes are too high in blood. So maybe you have too much sodium, maybe you have too much water, maybe you have too much waste, maybe you have too many hydrogens or too much bicarbonate. Then you're going to start to secrete stuff in higher quantities to get rid of that so that your blood levels remain consistent. Okay. That's part of urine production, is to make sure that your blood remains consistent throughout your body in terms of blood volume, in terms of things like glucose levels, amino acid levels, sodium chloride levels, calcium levels, right? Those are three basic, three basic components of urine production, right? And then once you create urine, urine actually is at the bottom of the collecting duct and enters into the minor calyx. This is why everything in the tubule is the filtrate, because you can move stuff back and forth between the filtrate and blood. But once you hit the minor calyx, you don't have a blood supply there anymore. So you can't actually move stuff back and forth. So this is our basic production, okay? And glomerular filtration. So let me talk about glomerular filtration rate in another video, because this one might be long already.